Today we are going to dealing with the joints. What are joints? Joints are union or junction. Union or junction. Junction between two or more bones. More bones or rigid part of a skeleton. Parts of a skeleton. This is the junction. And regarding joints, there is a classification like functional classification and structural classification. So we are going to discuss first in the functional classification. Functional classification. This means how that work, how that moves. In the functional classification, there is classified as arthrosis, then MP arthrosis, then last one is diarthrosis. In synarthrosis, legs permit to no movement. There is no movement like in suture of a skeleton, suture of a skull and gums that connect to the teeth to the skull. This type of movement, there is no movement, so this is called synarthrosis. And there is amphiarthrosis, allowed to slightly amount of movement, like intervertebral disc movement of a spine, and pubic symphysis of hip, This type of movement, so there is the slightly movement, certain amount of movement, including the amphiarthrosis. Then there is a diarthrosis. Free movable, like synovial joints. In synovial joint there is knee joint, shoulder and wrist joint. Then our another classification is like functional. Then there is a structural classification. In a structural classification, how binding tissue connects bone to each other. Connect bone to each other. There is a classification of like fibrous joint, then cartilaginous joint, and then synovial joint. Regarding fibrous joints by the fibrous tissue like synthrosis type fibrous joint, and in the fibrous joint there is some type like it is also classified as suture, syndesmosis and compose. And in the cartilage joint, in the suture, first discuss like suture, we have discussed a skull. In the skull, syndesmosis like interosseous membrane, like interosseous membrane joining, like tibia and fibula, fibula. Then there is compose. In compose, like we have already discussed, this to the skull. In the cartilaginous joint, now these are also divided as classified as synchondroses and symphyses. In synchondroses, these are like hyaline cartilage, and here is the fibrous cartilage, symphysis, fibrocartilage. Like in the hyaline cartilage, there is epiphyseal plate. Like epiphyseal plate connecting end and shaft of long bones. Like this is of femur, this is tibia, and in between there is this and this is epiphyseal plates, and that leading to the connection between them. So now there is a synovial joint. In the synovial joint there is a cavity, synovial cavity. These are the diarthrosis types. In synovial joint is classified as on axial, it is rotated in one axis. Then biaxial, then triaxial. In the on axial, there is also classification like planar, plane joint, and then gangliomos end joint, and then trochoid pivot joint, like pivot joint. And in the biaxial, there is two classifications like condyloid and saddle joint. In triaxial, ball and socket joint, ball and socket. So now we are moving on synovial joint. In the plane joint, there is like sliding movement, inclining and sliding movement. For example, acromyoclavicular joint. There is hinge joints in the flexion, like its permit flexion extension, like elbow joint, and trapezoid pivot joint. It's in the phalanges. So and pivot joint, that is the central axis of the first C1 to the occipital, like atlanto axial joint, atlantoaxial joint. Then in the biaxial, condylate joint permits like flexion, extension, abduction, adduction. Like metacarpal joint, metaphalangeal joint, phalangeus joint. In the saddle joint, like metacarpal joints and first digit. This is metacarpal joint at the base of first digit, like thumb. In the saddle joint, there is like it's permit like flexion, extension, and the abduction, adduction also. In the triaxial ball and socket joint, that like multi-axis like hip joint. These are the classification. Now we are going to like this is the ball and socket joint. This is a saddle joint, hinge joint, pivot joint, ellipsoid joint, and condyloid joints. Then there is planting joint. So we can also look in the synovial joint. This is the joint motion, and this is synovial. Like ball and socket joint in the shoulder joint, synovial joint. When we look for the saddle joint, this is the ball and socket joint. This is the saddle joint, thumb up finger. And when we look for the elbow joint is like hinge joint. Elbow joint is hinge joint, and pivot joint is like first spinal pivot joint. This is the spinal joint. In the spinal there is the pivot joint, ellipsoid in the wrist, and when the plantar joint in the feet. Also we can look in this also image, like elbow joint is like hinge joint, pivot joint in the cervical, first cervical, and first and second cervical vertebra, and there is the ball and socket joint in the hip joint. Sorry, I have wrong mention regarding the pivot joint. Initially that is not in occipital, it is joint with the first and second cervical. And then there is in hip joint, there is the ball and socket joint. And when we look for in the metacarpal and metacarpal joints, there is a condyle between the carpal and the wrist joint, radius and the carpal of the bone of the wrist. There is a condyle joint. And when we look the plane joint in the between tarsal bones, these are regarding some. And also is a saddle joint between the trapezium carpal bone and the post metacarpal bone. So almost we have covered the type of the joint.